A very important piece here. If you actually want your characters to look out of the world, personally, I didn't like the finishing. This is how I hold them. Hello there, whimsy folks. Welcome to another Small Biz Talk vlog, where I share some of my experience as a small clay business owner in India. In case some of you stumbled across my channel for the first time, thank you for stopping by. I am Shrey. I'm a clay and miniature artist. This vlog is going to cover a lot of queries and doubts I get from many of my viewers about all the supplies that I use. And yes, I'll link every single thing in the description. Now, I hadn't thought of making this video because there are so many of them out there, but lately I've been getting so many DMs and comments about the tools that I thought let's just make a video about it, because maybe some of you just want the exact ones that I use, or you also want the link to it. Now, enough of yapping, let's jump into everything that I use for my clay business. Now, I don't keep all my supplies in one box, so I basically have two boxes. The first one is for the clay box. It's an airtight box, and the lower one is box that I got my headphones in. So I just used them because it was black, looked good, sleek, and it was sturdy. Now, since you're talking about a clay business, let's start with the most important supply. For those of you who haven't seen my vlog, I use homemade gold porcelain clay. It's a simple clay recipe that I got online from some YouTube channels as well as a bunch of websites and blogs. In case you guys want to know how I make my clay, you can check out one of my previous vlogs where I've showcased the entire process of making gold porcelain clay along with how I make colored batches of these clay as well as how I store them. I'll link that video in the description. I basically make colored batches of few primary colors or frequently used colors and store them beforehand. I keep all my clay in this airtight container wrapped with cling film. Like there's a cling film on top of it, as well as I've wrapped all my clay using this cling film. By the way, this is a cling film wrapper. You can get them in your local stores or on Amazon too. Now, why am I talking about such simple things? It's because it is very important to have a good airtight container, because gold porcelain clay is very sensitive to the environment. Unlike polymer clay, which doesn't dry up when left in the open, gold porcelain clay acts like air dry clay. So basically, it'll become hard if you keep it in the open for long, and eventually if you use that slightly hardened clay to sculpt something, you'll see a bunch of cracks, even if you need that piece of clay very well. I get so many comments stating that your clay turned out to be way too sticky or way too dry, or it has a bunch of cracks, even if you followed the exact same recipe for making the clay. And trust me, I give the same answer to each and every person. Store your clay properly, because if you're actually following the exact steps and there has been no mistake in the ingredients measurements, then the most obvious reason is that your clay wasn't stored properly. If your storage environment is way too dry, your clay will become dry and crumbly as well as form a bunch of cracks. On the other hand, if the storing condition is way too humid, your clay will become slimy, sticky, and worst of all, in case you hadn't used appropriate amount of vinegar or any form of preservative while making the clay, you might even get fungus on that clay because of the clay reacting to the humid environment, and that can be pretty nasty. So how you store your clay is pretty important. Now, I make colored batches of few primarily used or frequently used colors and keep them beforehand separately, so that it makes my sculpting process pretty simpler and easier without any hassle. Some of the primary colors that I keep ready are obviously green. This is a very vibrant form of green that I use for making Coco the chocolatier, one of my favorite characters, and red along with some amount of violet as well as a dark form of green. These are the colors I mostly use for making Stu the witch as well as Pip the helper. These are some of my characters. Another primary color I make is brown for Lady Barbara, and some more basic general colors that I mostly use for making tiny cups or eyes for the black one, somewhere here and there a bit of this orange shade of yellow, as well as the most important one, white, for our very classic and oldest character Snuggle Snout. Let's move on to the next and important part. It's very messy inside, so I won't really show you the upper view. I'll just take a few things out and show you guys what's inside. I'm not sure if you guys can guess, but this was a sketch pen box that I got. I didn't want to throw it away because this seemed like a perfect place to store all my tiny sculpting equipments. And I added a tiny little tag here. Look at this. You know the best part? I don't use 90% of these things. They were available in sets, so I wanted 1 or 2 items from each set, so I had to buy the whole set. The most common ones that I use is the dot pens and the rolling pens. I'm not even sure if they are called these. I'll just put the links so that you don't have to worry about that. I use this to make eyes on my charms mostly, and these are the ones that I use to get any desired shape where I want a dent or I want to smoothen out a small dent, so these come handy in that case. Out of the cutters and blades, I only use this one X-Acto knife, 2 tiny cute tweezers, mostly to pick and drop smaller items or smaller bits of clay. I also sometimes use these for holding my clay charms while glazing them. Yeah, that's it. Apart from that, all these things that I have here are not really used that often. Mostly some of these very rarely whenever I have to make a particular kind of texture in my clay. But yeah, you don't really need the other ones that much. Moving on, we have this tiny little cute guy here. This, if you can't tell, is a weighing scale. Let me be very clear, you do not need it if you're not making a bunch of the same items, because I only use it to get the exact same size and shape in all of my clay charms. So basically, whenever I'm making a bulk of, say, Snuggle Snout, then I'll use this so that I can measure the body and I get the exact same amount of clay for each piece of that particular character. Now we have a tiny little acrylic rolling pen. This is pretty handy. I mostly use it to roll out thin sheets of clay, but there's also another interesting use for this, which I'll talk about in the glazing section later in the video. A tiny thin steel sheet, which I mostly use to cut down bigger pieces or chunks of clay. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name of this. I got this in a bundle of sculpting tools for pottery from Amazon. Some tiny little pliers which come very handy when I actually have to bend or twist and turn some of the jump rings while turning my clay charms into key rings, because you have to insert a bunch of eye pins and you have to also fold, twist and turn, so this comes handy because if I don't use them, I end up breaking my nails or hurting my fingers. Another use also can be to hold your clay charms while you glaze them. A very important piece here. No, it's not. It's not at all important. It's just for the aesthetics, because I used to think that I can use this to sculpt my clay charms and they won't stick. They do not, but it's difficult to hold. So if at all you want to get one of these, maybe go for a bigger one that can be more handy than a smaller one, I guess. Now this reminds me of an important supply that I use, a tempered glass. This is actually very handy because I end up sculpting everything on top of this. This helps the clay not stick to the surface. Rubbing alcohol and Q-tips, mostly for cleaning purpose. A quick note here, people who ask how to get rid of dirt, dust or small cracks, just take a Q-tip, dip it in the rubbing alcohol, use it to smoothen out the surface of your clay charms. That actually gets rid of some of the lighter lint and dirt on top of the charm surface, as well as smoothen out the tiny cracks, because if you don't smoothen out the tiny cracks, when the clay dries, it is going to become bigger, so the cracks will be seen more prominently once it dries up. So avoid that, use this. Next up are some cutters. I'm not much of a cutter fan, but I do have a few of them. I only use these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 here for making some of the flower shapes, some maple leaves, some for normal leaves, and some for bigger flowers. Recently, I got a bigger cutter because I plan on making something new, which you will probably see in the next videos. So for bigger ones, I just have this one. You can just buy one set of cutters, and I think that will be more than enough. This is a personal choice. If you do want to save some time and you are making a bunch of the same items, then go for it. Shading your clay charms. This is very important. If you actually want your characters to look out of the world, I think shading and adding a bit of a color makes a big difference. So these are basically soft pastel color. I usually scrape these using my X-Acto knife and use these 2 brushes to shade my items. I know they look horrible and wonky in not a very good shape, but trust me, if you want to have a very good texture, then deformed paint brushes are actually your way to go. Eye pins and jump rings. These again important if you need to turn your clay charms into tiny key rings. Now at first I got these from one of my local stores, but then I noticed a lot of them started rusting. So for all those who get a rusting issue, I'll advise you go for a stainless steel eye pin. Although they do not look that good, they actually work pretty well, and I did a tiny bit of a rusting test where I put one of this and this in a tiny dish and I added a bit of water as well as some salt to see how fast these rust, and trust me, this didn't rust because obviously this is stainless steel, but I still wanted to test before before putting it in my clay charms. Some of my recent cute discoveries are these key rings. This is the one that I started using in the very beginning. It's a simple little key ring. Two of my recent cute discoveries are these two guys. This is an apple shaped one and this is a strawberry shaped one. All of these are, I guess, from Weeds Fashion. With that, I guess we're done with the basic tools. Now let's move on to the scary part. This is a nightmare. This is one of the most taxing, irritating as well as scary part. Why? Because let me explain you have to be very careful during this entire process. So I would advise, if you cannot get the safety equipments or if you for some reason you can't afford or don't have access to the safety equipments, then do not glaze. It's not good for your health. If you want to glaze, then you need to get the entire mask and gloves kit. You cannot take your health for granted. This is UV resin. A lot of you ask me how I get the glass coating, how I get the glossy look on my clay charms. This is how I get it. This is how you make them look glass-like as well as make them durable, because this holds everything together and makes it sort of unbreakable to tiny dents and drops. But I still won't advise you to go and smash your clay charms somewhere, because that's sad. Why would you even do that? And for all those people who have asked me why your clay charms are sticky once you apply this, even if you keep them out for drying for a few days, they will be sticky because this is UV resin. It needs UV rays to dry up as per my knowledge, and for that you can either put it out in the sun, like direct sunlight, and let it dry for a few days, I guess. So I went out and got this UV nail lamp. I'm not sure about the exact name. So you can use this, use a simple old brush, add a bit of this UV resin on top of your clay charms, spread it across the charm, and then you can put your clay charms in this and they dry up pretty quickly. Drying time will be difficult to tell because it depends on two things: how many number of coatings you have applied to your clay charms, how thick your UV resin coating is, and the second factor is the power of your UV lamp. Mine, I guess if I'm not wrong, is around 48 watts. I glaze the top part for 3 to 4 minutes and the bottom part for another 3 to 4 minutes. Now coming back to this, I actually use this along with glue tacks. These are small bits of sticky clay-like thing. So I just take a tiny piece of this, put it on top of the acrylic rolling pin and stick them like this. It's pretty sturdy, so it doesn't really fall off. Obviously don't go and bang it somewhere because then it'll fall off. So this is how I hold them, apply my resin using a paintbrush and put it inside the UV lamp for glazing. Now if you're thinking, Shrey, this is not my thing, this is scary, I don't want to deal with UV resin, then you can do something that I used to do earlier. This is clear lacquer spray. This is simple. I'll still advise you to wear gloves while using it. You just take your clay charm, spray it on top of it. It gives a very thin layer of glossy look and it also holds things together. So just to sum it up for you guys, this is cheaper, this is a bit more costly, this requires a lot of more safety equipments along with a UV lamp. This doesn't really require anything else other than maybe a glove, and if you want you can get a mask too. This gave a thicker, more quality coating, so the charms look a bit more durable as well as a bit more professional. This was a very thin coating, so personally I didn't like the finishing of it. Maybe get a smaller version of this first, try it out and see for yourself. You might end up liking it. If you don't, then you can try this. The final and the most important supply for this section is this little girl here. First of all, safety goggles. This doesn't belong to me, I just stole it from my boyfriend's place. Any good goggles would be nice to protect your eyes. Half face piece respirator with good filters. You need to have this if you're planning on using UV resin and glazing something. Keep in mind you'll also have to keep replacing the filters. These come out. The more you glaze, the more frequently you'll have to change these. I would advise going for a well-known brand so that the filters are easily available to you later on too. And also some gloves. These are not the best example of proper gloves. I would advise, if you're going to buy one, then go for a more heavy duty industrial grade one. Those will be more appropriate for this. Don't take these lightly. If at all you plan on glazing using UV resin, do get this. In case for some reason you can't really get these because of accessibility issue or you can't afford it, then I would advise not to use UV resin. Just go for clear lacquer or just go for a matte look on your clay charms. With that, I'll wrap it up here. I hope this video was helpful. Once again, all the links are in the description. Thanks again for stopping by. I'll see you guys soon.
A little different than all the rest. I quite fashioned where I had sometimes played chess. And when I